feral friends and fellow nature nerds. Thank you for tuning in to Dirt Dispatch number 26. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. So in the last Dirt Dispatch episode, I talked about some signs that spring had arrived, despite the chilly temperatures and the occasional snow showers that we're still getting. This week, there were even more signs in the form of more migratory birds making appearances. So let me tell you about those. The first was the return of the meadowlarks. Now, to be fair, Cheyenne is on the very edge of the meadowlarks' year-round range, so they may or may not be migratory around here. But what I'm certain of is that I haven't seen any for many, many months. Now, if you don't know the meadowlark, they're actually a member of the blackbird family, and they're quite striking. They have a bright yellow breast and belly, and it's intersected by a black V shape. They like open grasslands, fields, and you see them sitting on fences and street signs and things like that. But 90% of the time, you'll hear them before you see them. Their song is described as flute-like, and this is what it sounds like. They feed and nest on the ground, and they build a nest that's usually at least partially covered with a grass roof. But it might be completely open, or it might have a complete roof with an entrance tunnel that's actually several feet long. Now, they're one of those birds that's largely ignored by a lot of people that live in their range. In fact, John James Audubon gave the western meadowlark its scientific name, Sturnella, which means starling-like, neglecta, because he claimed that most explorers and settlers who ventured west of the Mississippi River after Lewis and Clark overlooked this very common bird. Now, the second returning migratory birds that I saw this week were turkey vultures. Not pretty or vocal like the meadowlarks, but I was excited to see my first vultures of the year this last week. Turkey vultures are obligate scavengers, and they forage primarily with their sense of smell. Now, while carrion may not be less common in the winter, think about putting things in the freezer and the refrigerator. Those freezing temperatures definitely make it less smelly and therefore harder for the turkey vulture to find. So they head south for the winter where dead stuff can still get good and stinky. Interestingly, here in Wyoming, not a lot is known about the distribution of turkey vultures and specifically where they nest. So the University of Wyoming sponsors a community science project where you can report turkey vulture sightings. So I'm always excited when I see them and I can contribute my observations to the project. There's a couple of documented roosting sites on the University of Wyoming campus in Laramie, and last year I was able to document a roosting site here in Cheyenne that was previously unknown. Now, the third returning migrant I spotted this week was an American kestrel. Kestrels are raptors. They're the smallest and most common raptor in North America. They're a falcon about the size of a mourning dove, and they're slate blue, pale, and rusty brown with black spots and sideburns. The one I saw when I first saw it, I thought it was a kestrel, but I wasn't 100% sure. I just caught a glimpse of it as it flew past and perched on a wire. But I was returning on the same route and I spotted it again, and my suspicion was confirmed. When I saw it the second time, it was hovering in midair, a behavior called kiting that's fairly unique to kestrels. Along with perching and scanning, kiting is one of the ways that kestrels hunt. Some other kestrel fun facts: they can see ultraviolet light, which helps them see urine trails left behind by voles, one of their common prey. Kestrels also cache food, hiding surplus kills in clumps of grass, tree roots, bushes, fence posts, and tree cavities and tree limbs, saving it for lean times and also hiding it from thieves. Okay, one last thing I want to talk about before I wrap this one up, just because it came up in conversation last week. It's not related to spring, it is related to summer though, and that's heat lightning. Now, I love a good summer thunderstorm, and if you've ever lived someplace where summers are hot and humid, you've probably heard the term heat lightning. The common belief here is that heat lightning is produced by hot, humid conditions, and its defining feature is a lack of thunder. Only here's the thing, heat lightning doesn't actually exist. Yeah, it's not a thing. Now, if you're thinking, well, yes, it does. I've experienced it myself. I've seen lightning with no thunder. I want you to really think about that experience, though. Where was the lightning? Well, I'm going to venture a guess that it was quite a ways off in the distance, which always seems to be the case. Heat lightning never happens where you're standing. What you're seeing is lightning from a distant thunderstorm. At night, the flashes from lightning can be visible up to 100 miles away. But the sound of the thunder, well, it doesn't carry that far. 10 to 15 miles is about the limit. And that doesn't factor in things like the curve of the earth or the way the sound reflects off the surface and how the temperature and density of air at different altitudes affects the way that sound travels. Suffice to say, if you'd been closer to the source of that lightning, you would have been able to hear the thunder. Well, I hope that didn't burst anyone's bubble. I still look forward to seeing some lightning in the coming months, even if I can't hear the thunder. If you want to support the podcast, there's several ways you can do that. You could consider becoming a patron. Visit patreon.com/dispatchesfromtheforest to get all the info on pricing and perks. If you want to make a one-time donation, you can do PayPal using my email address, dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com, or the Cash App and the hashtag ForestNerd. You could head over to the merch store at cafepress.com/shop/dispatchesfromtheforest, click on products, and get yourself some really nice Dispatches from the Forest merch. Finally, you can follow Dispatches from the Forest on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.